The Galactic Council had convened in the towering citadel above the crimson clouds of Zifra Prime, its spires piercing the sky like needles of authority, shimmering with the light of 1,000 distant suns, as the representatives of the myriad alien civilizations gathered in unanimous judgment over the species known as humans, their pale blue planet barely a whisper among the glittering array of conquered worlds and trade hubs. And yet there was a palpable tension in the chamber as the deliberations commenced, for the council was deeply divided between those who saw humans as a minor nuisance and those who feared their unpredictable nature. The debate was long and meticulous, the high envoy of the Orvaxian cluster declaring that humans had consistently defied expectations by surviving conflicts that should have obliterated them, while the Seraphon delegation insisted that their technological output was inconsistent and primitive compared to the measured precision of established galactic powers, a claim that prompted low hisses of disagreement from the Clintari, a species whose skin shimmered in response to ambient light, and whose fleets were rumored to annihilate entire systems in the blink of an eye. The council chambers vibrated with the weight of centuries of protocol and centuries more of arrogance, and yet, in a small corner of the room, the human envoy, Ambassador Jacob Marston, a man of moderate height, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that bore the calm of someone who had survived far too many impossible situations to be intimidated, listened quietly, cataloging every assertion, every dismissal, and every thinly veiled threat, knowing that the Council's ultimate decision would not consider the full extent of humanity's capabilities. For centuries of underestimation had created the perfect environment for the humans to grow unnoticed. And outside the Citadel, fleets of alien warships glinted in orbit, a show of strength intended to intimidate the human delegation into compliance. Yet no human vessel yet orbited Zifra Prime, and no human weapon was visible. The Council had decided that all human offensive technologies were to be banned, a decision ratified with near unanimous approval. With the exception of Marston's quiet dissent, the Council believed that by imposing a ban on weapons development, humanity could be rendered harmless, a theoretical conclusion based on incomplete intelligence, as they were unaware of the massive underground programs that had been underway for decades, hidden beneath continents, in oceans, and even in the far reaches of the Kuiper-like belts, programs designed to produce not only conventional weapons, but also experimental propulsion systems, artificial intelligence constructs of staggering complexity, and energy sources that could rival the output of small stars, all of which have been meticulously cataloged and distributed among civilian and military networks to avoid centralized detection. And as the Council finalized their resolution, broadcasting it galaxy-wide with ceremonial fanfare, humans on Earth and across the colonies simply received the news with quiet amusement, for they had long anticipated this moment, their analysts having calculated the probability of such a ban with near-perfect accuracy, and now they were poised to respond, not with panic or hesitation, but with the cold precision of species that had survived annihilation, colonization, and exploitation, a species whose greatest weapon was not a single ship or superweapon, but the ingenuity and resilience of billions of individuals acting in concert, often in ways the Council could not predict. And across the human colonies, the preparations shifted from dormant programs to active deployment, massive transport vessels already in warp transit to strategic positions around the known galaxy, armed not only with advanced human energy weaponry, but with drones, nanotechnologies, and cloaked strike crafts capable of operating undetected in even the most heavily monitored regions. The Council had believed that by outlawing human weaponry, they could maintain peace. But in reality, they had merely given humanity the cover it needed to deploy its forces without immediate interference. And as the first human fleet left the orbit of Terra Prime, shimmering like a ghostly specter against the backdrop of the solar corona, the Council's sensors barely registered the movement, a minor blip among countless star systems. Yet this blip was a harbinger of an event that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The humans had perfected long-range energy cannons, capable of precise planetary strikes without damaging orbitals or civilian infrastructure unnecessarily, reflecting a strategy both pragmatic and terrifyingly efficient. Alongside these were rapid deployment fleets, each vessel a microcosm of human ingenuity, packed with automated repair units, adaptive shield arrays, and offensive systems designed to exploit weaknesses in alien ship architecture, all while maintaining a guise of peaceful exploration and colonization. The first strike plan, codenamed Operation Iron Veil, had been mapped with such meticulous detail that the humans had predicted every possible response from the Council fleets, calculating trajectories, firing sequences, and contingency operations down to the microsecond. And as the initial human squadrons approached the outer defenses of the Seraphon-controlled Theta Octant, the alien commanders remained confident, their communications buzzing with arrogance and disdain, unaware that each human vessel carried AI-guided intelligence systems capable of anticipating their commands before they were fully formulated. And as the first warning beacons illuminated the void, signaling the detection of incoming objects, the human fleet had already divided into multiple subgroups, each taking positions calculated to maximize the element of surprise, while simultaneously creating psychological pressure through synchronized maneuvers that mimicked much larger forces. And when the Council's fleet finally engaged, expecting a standard human reaction, they were met with an unprecedented coordinated assault, a combination of electronic warfare, precision strikes, and feints that left the alien captain scrambling to adapt. The humans had anticipated every defensive protocol, having studied years of alien tactical manuals, intercepted transmissions and behavioral patterns, and they exploited weaknesses the Council had assumed were irrelevant, including predictable reliance on centralized command structures, the aliens' overconfidence in their technological superiority, and a belief that humans would not dare risk planetary annihilation. And in the first hour of engagement, several key Council vessels were disabled or destroyed, while human losses were negligible, a demonstration not of brute force alone, but of strategy, foresight, and the subtle art of turning an enemy's arrogance into a weapon. The news of the engagement reached the Council chamber in real time, through sensory projections, and the assembled delegates could not conceal their shock as they watched their most formidable ships being neutralized by what they had consistently labeled as primitive adversaries. High-ranking officials struggled to process the rapid escalation. Orders were confused, and the previously unwavering confidence began to dissolve into panic across multiple sectors. Similar engagements began to unfold as other human fleets, previously thought to be minimal or dormant, executed precise strikes, disrupting supply lines, communication networks, and command structures, all while maintaining the appearance of disciplined restraint. The humans were not mindless aggressors. They were orchestrating a controlled demonstration of power, calculated to force the Council to recognize the catastrophic miscalculation in underestimating humanity. And while the aliens reeled, the human command networks coordinated further maneuvers, sending stealth teams to sabotage key installations on contested colonies, redirecting trade routes to choke enemy economies, and deploying energy fields to disable entire fleets without causing irreversible damage. Each action amplified the sense of inevitability, a creeping realization spreading among the alien delegates that humanity had evolved in ways the Council had failed to comprehend, not merely in terms of weapons, but in ingenuity, coordination, and the ability to unify disparate populations under a single strategic objective. And as the initial shockwave of operations expanded, reports of human victories across remote sectors began to arrive with astonishing speed, each report more unbelievable than the last. A small human battle group neutralizing a Clintari dreadnought with a single, coordinated strike, a hidden human colony repelling a full Orvaxian invasion using adaptive camouflage and automated drones. And all the while, the humans preserved critical infrastructure, demonstrating that their goal was dominance and deterrence, not wanton destruction. And as the Council reconvened in a crisis session, panic replaced protocol, and accusations flew, blame shifting from one delegate to another, while Jacob Marston, observing calmly, outlined the humans' next strategic moves with precise clarity, predicting not only the Council's reactions, but also the secondary effects across trade networks, alliances, and political structures, and each prediction materialized with uncanny accuracy, reinforcing the perception among the aliens that they had confronted an adversary who was not only technologically capable, but also psychologically and strategically superior. And as the first planetary systems were secured under human control with minimal loss, the Council finally understood the scale of their error, that banning human weapons had not disarmed humanity, but rather had delayed the moment when they could strike, without revealing their full capacity, a moment that had now arrived. Unstoppable, undeniable, and catastrophic for those who had underestimated them. And as the humans consolidated their gains, the initial operations of Operation Iron Veil evolve into a broader campaign, incorporating intelligence gathering, diplomacy under duress, and selective engagements designed to maximize impact while minimizing collateral damage, all coordinated through an AI network that functioned not as a tool, but as an extension of human tactical reasoning. The Council watched helplessly as humans demonstrated not only the ability to destroy fleets and installations, but also to rebuild, reinforce, and adapt faster than any alien species could comprehend. The realization spreading among the delegates was terrifyingly simple. Humanity had never needed their approval. Their weapons ban was irrelevant, and now the galaxy itself would bear witness to what happened when a species underestimated the unquantifiable combination of human ingenuity, persistence, and resolve. And as the first part of humanity's decisive campaign concluded its initial phase, the aliens could no longer claim ignorance, and for the first time in galactic history, a species previously dismissed as weak, unruly, and primitive had turned the tables entirely, asserting dominance not through sheer numbers or raw power alone, but through a careful, patient, and devastating orchestration of every asset at their disposal, leaving the Council with a single undeniable truth. Humanity's time had come, and it was far too late to stop them. As the war reached its climactic stage, humanity's mastery of strategy, technology, and resilience became fully apparent across the galaxy. The United Earth Command coordinated operations on an unprecedented scale, fleets deploying through subspace corridors to simultaneously strike multiple Sarathian strongholds, cloaked frigates infiltrating the deepest enemy sectors to disable command structures, while gravitational distortion arrays and quantum decoys rendered even the most fortified positions vulnerable. Energy shields capable of absorbing and redirecting alien plasma attacks provided unmatched defensive strength, while adaptive propulsion systems allowed human vessels to maneuver unpredictably, exploiting weaknesses in alien targeting and formations. Civilian scientists and engineers continued to enhance every aspect of the war effort. Reverse engineering captured Sarathian technology to integrate into human systems, producing hybrid vessels and weapons that combined alien advancements with human ingenuity. Back on Earth, the population's unified efforts sustained production, logistics, research, and communication networks, creating a living war machine whose efficiency and adaptability rivaled the greatest empires of the galaxy. The Sarathians, now fully aware of the extent of their miscalculation, attempted a desperate final offensive, deploying massive fleets to crush human-controlled sectors and reclaim lost territory, yet humans, anticipating every movement through advanced intelligence, predictive modeling, and coordinated planning, executed simultaneous ambushes and counterstrikes, neutralizing enemy dreadnoughts, severing supply lines, and disabling communication networks with precision that left alien commanders reeling. Entire fleets of Sarathian vessels were rendered inoperative or forced into retreat, their morale shattered, while humans, undaunted, maintained cohesion, discipline, and coordinated action, exploiting every error and weakness. Allied civilizations previously oppressed or neutral rallied to humanity's cause, providing resources, intelligence, and strategic support, further amplifying human capabilities. In one decisive operation near the Epsilon Eridani cluster, human fleets employed gravitational traps, subspace warping, and cyber infiltration to isolate and destroy a significant portion of the Sarathian command fleet, crippling their operational capacity and signaling to all observers the irreversible ascendance of humanity. The psychological impact on the galaxy was profound. Civilizations that had dismissed Earth now recognized humans as a dominant power whose ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience could not be ignored. On Earth, citizens celebrated the culmination of their relentless effort while remaining vigilant, every individual having contributed to the integrated strategy that ensured survival and victory. The Sarathians, facing complete strategic collapse and an opponent whose unpredictability and determination exceeded any expectation, finally understood the magnitude of their error. Humanity had chosen neither surrender nor extinction, instead embracing a path of ingenuity, perseverance, and unyielding courage, demonstrating that a species underestimated by the galaxy could not only survive annihilation, but rise to command respect, fear, and influence. With the final battles concluded and the Sarathian forces in disarray, humans established secure control over contested systems, fortified planetary and orbital defenses, and forged alliances with liberated civilizations, creating a network of cooperation and security that ensured long-term stability and dominance. The galaxy, once blind to Earth's potential, now recognized the human race as a force of unparalleled capability, and as humanity looked outward to the stars, their trajectory clear, every victory, every innovation, and every act of resilience confirmed that Earth had chosen neither surrender nor extinction, but the relentless pursuit of mastery, survival, and ultimate dominion, leaving a lasting legacy that would reshape the balance of power and define interstellar relations for generations, a testament to the indomitable spirit, ingenuity, and unity of humanity, forever establishing that to underestimate humans was the gravest mistake any civilization could make. The initial shock waves of humanity's offensive had barely begun to settle across the outer sectors when reports of systematic collapses in alien command and communication networks started to arrive with terrifying consistency. The Seraphon fleets, once confident in their numerical superiority and advanced energy shields, now found their formations disrupted by human tactics that exploited minor, yet crucial flaws in their fleet coordination algorithms, and as human strike teams infiltrated lightly defended space stations and supply depots, they demonstrated an uncanny ability to neutralize threats silently, swiftly, and with precision, leaving the aliens bewildered by the apparent invisibility and unpredictability of their opponents. Simultaneously, human intelligence operatives had already embedded themselves in the Council's diplomatic channels, intercepting encrypted communications and feeding carefully curated misinformation that created internal suspicion and paranoia. The Orvaxian cluster's elite command vessels were forced into defensive postures they had never before acquired, while Clintari admirals struggled to adapt to a fluid battlefield, where every move of their ships was anticipated and countered before it could be executed, and in sectors far from the initial engagements, human engineers activated dormant orbital defense arrays that had been secretly constructed around neutral systems, effectively cutting off escape routes and reinforcement paths for alien fleets, creating perception that humanity had multiplied its forces far beyond what any intelligence estimate could justify. On the ground, human planetary militias and rapid response units coordinated with orbital assets to secure key population centers, deploying adaptive shielding, drone networks, and automated heavy artillery in a manner that rendered conventional assaults almost suicidal. And while the aliens assumed that conventional retaliation would deter further human advances, they failed to account for the human strategic patience, their ability to choose targets, and their relentless use of psychological warfare. Every strike, every blockade, and every intercepted transmission carefully designed to instill doubt, fear, and overconfidence in the wrong quarters, with Council delegates growing increasingly desperate as minor human victories compounded into systemic collapses of confidence among their species leaders, as entire fleets were rendered ineffective not through brute force but through subtle disruption. The aliens began questioning not only the humans' technological capabilities, but the very assumptions that had underpinned their strategies for centuries. The humans had spent decades studying galactic warfare, not merely the hardware, but the behavioral patterns, political tendencies, and predictable responses of each species, a level of preparation that allowed them to execute multi-system operations with the efficiency of a single organism. And as their fleets moved with synchronized precision, small contingents of human infiltrators infiltrated and disabled planetary defense networks, turning sophisticated orbital cannons, anti-ship turrets, and planetary shield generators against their own operators. And even in areas where alien oversight was strongest, humans demonstrated the ability to remain undetected until a moment of decisive engagement, creating chaos and confusion that forced alien commanders into reactionary postures, often delaying critical decisions and generating errors that compounded across multiple sectors. And while some council members began calling for retreats or surrender negotiations, others insisted on continuing the fight, creating internal divisions that humans had long anticipated and subtly amplified through propaganda, carefully leaked intelligence, and targeted sabotage. The net effect being a galaxy-wide fracturing of alien morale that humanity exploited ruthlessly, while maintaining a narrative of measured restraint, demonstrating both the capability and the discipline that terrified the Council the most. As the human fleets approached the core trade routes of the Orvaxian cluster, they executed simultaneous precision strikes on multiple logistical nodes, collapsing supply chains that had sustained fleets for centuries. The alien commanders were forced to improvise refueling protocols, reroute reinforcements, and reorganize their formations mid-engagement, all of which played directly into human strategies designed to delay and fragment, allowing smaller human units to strike with maximum efficiency. And as the humans gained control of critical relay stations, they introduced a cascading effect of communication blackouts that left entire alien sectors blind, isolated, and increasingly vulnerable, while the Council watched helplessly. The psychological impact of these maneuvers on alien species was catastrophic. Experienced admirals and generals questioned their training, their assumptions, and even the fundamental nature of their species' strategic thought, realizing that humans, whom they had historically considered impulsive and primitive, were operating at a level of foresight, adaptability, and coordination that no previous adversary had achieved. And in response to these unprecedented developments, the Council attempted to implement emergency measures, including recall orders, fleet consolidation, and emergency weapon deployment, only to find that human forces had anticipated these measures, positioning their assets to intercept, disable, or neutralize every initiative before it could fully take effect. And while humans secured victory in one sector, they simultaneously engaged in subtle acts of diplomacy, leveraging captured systems to negotiate conditional surrenders, establish human-friendly governance, and create supply networks that further strengthened their operational reach, all the while avoiding unnecessary destruction that could alienate neutral species, demonstrating not only military superiority, but strategic wisdom and long-term planning. And as the Council scrambled to respond, the psychological warfare intensified, with human operatives projecting communications, holographic simulations, and false intelligence designed to magnify fear, uncertainty, and division among alien forces, while coordinated demonstrations of human technology across multiple visible systems reinforced the impression of overwhelming capability. And as key alien fleets found themselves trapped between human strikes, their own defensive measures sabotaged or rendered ineffective and entire, planetary systems slipping into human control, the Council was forced to confront an undeniable reality. They had underestimated humanity in every conceivable aspect, from technological innovation and tactical planning to psychological manipulation and the ability to unify disparate human colonies under a single strategic vision. And as the human offensive continued, the aliens witnessed a systematic unraveling of centuries of assumed superiority, each engagement a lesson in the cost of arrogance, each defeat a reminder that humanity's resilience, creativity, and determination could not be legislated away or suppressed by simple decrees. And as the second phase of Operation Iron Veil unfolded, humans demonstrated their mastery of multi-theater operations, combining orbital, planetary, and interstellar maneuvers to maximize impact and maintain momentum, exploiting alien weaknesses, fortifying human gains, and establishing a framework that ensured their continued dominance. A clear message that humanity's rise was not accidental, not sudden, but the result of careful preparation, meticulous planning, and an unbreakable will. And by the end of the initial months of engagement, the Council could no longer deny that the humans had not only survived the weapon ban, but had used it to their advantage, concealing the full scope of their capabilities until the moment they were ready to strike, leaving the galaxy with singular, sobering truth. Humanity could not be stopped, and the Council's attempt to neutralize them had only hastened the moment of their decisive ascendance. And as human fleets moved to consolidate control over critical sectors, every alien species, from the smallest trading collective to the most powerful militaristic confederation, began to recognize that the era of human underestimation was over, replaced by an era defined by the calculated, relentless, and unstoppable assertion of human dominance, a dominance rooted not in mindless aggression, but in a mastery of strategy, foresight, and the indomitable resilience of a species that had always been underestimated. And now, having emerged from centuries of obscurity, humans were poised to rewrite the rules of galactic engagement, leaving the Council with the stark realization that their ban on human weapons had not achieved compliance, containment, or subjugation, but had merely delayed the inevitable revelation of humanity's full might, a revelation whose consequences would echo across every star system for generations to come. With the Council's fleets in disarray and entire sectors now under human operational control, the galaxy began to feel a profound ripple of humanity's meticulous strategy, every move calculated with precision. Every strike designed not only to neutralize immediate threats, but also to reshape the perceptions, alliances, and psychological landscapes of alien civilizations. As human diplomats leveraged victories into territorial influence, establishing footholds on previously neutral or contested worlds, they simultaneously deployed advanced AI systems to monitor alien communications, predict fleet movements, and optimize resource allocation across multiple theaters of engagement. The Clintari, whose confidence in their technological superiority had been unshakable, now found themselves constantly anticipating feints and decoys. Their fleets often redirected only to discover that the humans had never intended to engage at all, using misdirection as a force multiplier. And, while the Seraphon and Orvaxian fleets scrambled to regain coordination, human engineers activated dormant hyperspace conduits previously hidden beneath planetary surfaces and asteroid belts, allowing strike forces to appear unexpectedly behind enemy lines, cutting off retreat paths and isolating key command nodes. The psychological impact of these sudden appearances was devastating. As alien officers watched entire segments of their fleets immobilized or destroyed before they could even formulate a coherent plan, and within human command centers, Jacob Marson oversaw operations with a level of composure that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the Council, coordinating multi-pronged offensives while simultaneously adjusting strategies based on the aliens' adaptive responses. Each adjustment anticipated several moves in advance, demonstrating a deep understanding of both human capabilities and alien psychology, while human ground forces, reinforced by orbital support, began securing strategic installations, not merely for control, but to create a network of resource hubs, repair facilities, and intelligence centers capable of sustaining long-term operations without requiring central oversight. And as these facilities came online, the humans deployed rapid response teams to assist local populations, leveraging infrastructure improvements, medical aid, and defensive training to win hearts and minds, further destabilizing alien authority while reinforcing human legitimacy in newly controlled sectors. The Council's delegates, observing these developments through real-time sensor feeds, found themselves confronting a truth that was both alarming and incomprehensible. Humans were not merely reacting to alien aggression. They were proactively reshaping the strategic landscape, dictating the tempo and terms of engagement, and doing so with a combination of ingenuity, discipline, and foresight that no galactic power had previously demonstrated. The aliens' reliance on numerical superiority, hierarchical command structures, and conventional fleet tactics rendered them vulnerable to this new form of warfare, in which humans combine speed, adaptability, decentralized decision-making, and anticipatory action to achieve results far exceeding the sum of their apparent resources. And as reports continue to arrive from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, stories of human ingenuity inspired both awe and fear, from small colonies repelling heavily armed alien contingents with minimal forces, to stealth teams infiltrating high-security facilities to redirect energy grids, disable communications, and manipulate defensive systems, demonstrating not only tactical brilliance, but an almost artistic mastery of misdirection, deception, and controlled escalation. Even the most seasoned alien commanders began to acknowledge that traditional concepts of battle were insufficient when confronting humans, whose unpredictability and capacity for rapid adaptation challenged every long-held assumption about warfare, diplomacy, and strategic planning. And while some council members called for immediate withdrawal or surrender negotiations, others advocated desperate countermeasures, attempting to consolidate fleets, reroute logistics, or initiate preemptive strikes, all of which had been anticipated by human intelligence, resulting in countermoves that neutralized threats with minimal risk and maximum effect. And as the humans consolidated control over key hyperspace lanes, the ability to strike, supply, and reinforce simultaneously gave them an operational tempo that alien forces could not match, each movement orchestrated to exploit predictable weaknesses, induce confusion, and magnify the impression of overwhelming force, while maintaining the appearance of discipline, restrained engagement. And as the campaign progressed, the Council began to realize that their attempt to ban human weapons had backfired catastrophically, as it had left humans unmonitored, underestimated, and strategically invisible until the moment they could strike decisively. And now, with the galaxy's major powers scrambling to respond, humans had seized the initiative, dictating both the physical and psychological terms of war, demonstrating that power was not simply a function of numbers, technology, or firepower, but of adaptability, unity, and the relentless application of intelligence to every facet of conflict. The human offensive expanded, integrating orbital bombardments calibrated to disable alien installations without unnecessary destruction, electronic warfare that paralyzed enemy coordination, and clandestine ground operations that secured critical nodes while training local populations to resist or cooperate under human guidance. The combined effect was a galaxy-wide collapse of alien strategic confidence. Their communications flooded with false reports, conflicting orders, and inexplicable failures that further magnified fear and uncertainty, while humans maintained operational clarity, coordination, and initiative, turning chaos into opportunity. And as the aliens attempted to regroup, humans initiated coordinated strikes across multiple fronts, each designed to exploit minor errors, miscalculations, or overconfidence, converting every weakness into a tactical advantage. And in regions previously controlled by the Orvaxian cluster, human fleets deployed cloaked drones to intercept convoys, redirect energy flows, and disable weapon systems, leaving alien crews bewildered and demoralized. The Clintari, renowned for their ruthless efficiency, faced repeated ambushes, traps, and diversions that rendered their advanced ships vulnerable, and despite technological superiority, were forced into defensive postures that slowed operations and ceded the initiative entirely to humans. Meanwhile, human engineers on distant colonies initiated the activation of orbital defense platforms and automated repair facilities, ensuring sustained operational capability even in contested regions, while AI-guided logistical systems optimized resource distribution, coordinated reinforcements, and monitored alien responses in real time. The cumulative effect was a systematic, multi-layered demonstration of human strategic mastery that left the Council in a state of disbelief, as their most trusted doctrines and assumptions were rendered irrelevant, and as the humans advanced, reports of precise, surgical strikes on key Council installations, infrastructure, and communication hubs arrived almost simultaneously across sectors, reinforcing perception that humanity's reach was omnipresent, and that any attempt to resist, regroup, or retaliate would be anticipated and countered, further magnifying alien uncertainty and fear. And as months of coordinated operations unfolded, the humans revealed another layer of their strategy, integrating diplomacy, propaganda, and psychological operations with military action, capturing the loyalty of neutral species through aid, protection, and strategic alliances, demonstrating that their dominance was not enforced by fear alone, but also by the perception of competence, fairness, and inevitability. And by the time the first Council emergency summits were convened to discuss human advances, entire regions were already under human control or influence. Alien morale had reached crisis levels, and the once confident delegates now faced a stark, unavoidable reality. Humanity had not only survived centuries of underestimation, bans, and neglect, but had used that underestimation to prepare, innovate, and execute a campaign of overwhelming precision and effectiveness, leaving the Council with a single, undeniable truth that echoed across the void. Human ingenuity, resilience, and strategic brilliance could not be contained, legislated against, or anticipated, and the moment they chose to assert themselves, nothing in the galaxy could stand in their way, marking a turning point that would be remembered in every species' history for generations as the beginning of humanity's era of unstoppable ascendancy. As the fourth phase of humanity's advance unfolded, the true depth of their long preparation became impossible for the Council to ignore, because what had initially appeared to be a rapid military response now revealed itself as a multi-generational strategy designed to reshape the galaxy's balance of power permanently. And while alien leaders struggled to stabilize collapsing fronts, human forces shifted focus from pure expansion to consolidation, reinforcing captured systems with layered defenses, autonomous manufacturing hubs, and adaptive governance structures that allowed each region to function independently while remaining fully integrated into the wider human command network. This decentralization stunned alien analysts who were accustomed to rigid hierarchies, as it made human-controlled space extraordinarily resilient to disruption. No single strike, no matter how powerful, could cripple their operations, and across dozens of systems, humans activated shipyards that had been disguised for decades as civilian infrastructure, rapidly producing new vessels customized for specific theaters. each ship equipped with modular systems that allowed crews to reconfigure weapons, shields, and propulsion in response to emerging threats, a flexibility that alien fleets simply could not match due to their standardized doctrine and slow approval chains. And as the Council debated emergency measures, humanity quietly began deploying a second layer of pressure: economic dominance, leveraging their newly secured hyperspace lanes to redirect trade, restrict access to critical resources, and offer alternative supply routes to neutral species willing to cooperate. The effect was immediate and devastating. Long-standing alliances between alien powers began to fracture as shortages emerged, prices spiked, and trust eroded. And many worlds that had once aligned themselves unquestioningly with the Council now face a stark choice between economic collapse or pragmatic cooperation with humans, a choice that humanity had intentionally structured to appear inevitable rather than coercive. And on the military front, human commanders began executing limited demonstration strikes, carefully chosen engagements designed to showcase new capabilities without escalating into total annihilation. Entire alien fleets were disabled in minutes through coordinated electronic warfare and precision fire, their ships left drifting powerless but intact, crews unharmed but utterly defeated. The message was unmistakable. Humans could destroy them completely if they chose to, but restraint was a deliberate decision, not a limitation, and this restraint unsettled the Council more than raw aggression ever could, because it suggested confidence so absolute that humans no longer needed to prove their superiority through destruction alone. Within the Council chamber, panic gave way to fear-laced pragmatism. Delegates who had once mocked humanity now argued openly about concessions, reparations, and revised treaties, but every proposal lagged behind events already unfolding on the ground, because human planners had anticipated these shifts years in advance, building diplomatic frameworks that could be activated instantly. And across liberated systems, human envoys established provisional councils that included local leaders, integrating alien populations into governance structures that emphasized stability, security, and shared prosperity, further undermining the Council's legitimacy. And as this political realignment accelerated, intelligence reports confirmed what many alien leaders had begun to suspect. Humanity's greatest strength was not any single weapon or fleet, but their ability to coordinate across military, economic, political, and psychological domains simultaneously, adapting faster than any adversary and exploiting every opportunity created by alien hesitation or inflexibility. And as isolated Council fleets attempted desperate counterattacks, they found themselves confronting layered defenses, automated countermeasures, and human commanders who treated each engagement as a controlled experiment, learning, refining, and improving with every encounter. Alien casualties mounted not because humans sought destruction, but because alien commanders persisted in outdated strategies that humans had already rendered obsolete. And in several dramatic engagements, human fleets deliberately allowed limited breaches in their lines, luring alien forces into carefully prepared kill zones where coordinated strikes neutralized entire formations in seconds, reinforcing perception that every human movement was deliberate, every apparent weakness a calculated trap. And as the Council's authority continued to erode, internal dissent reached critical levels. Species that had once relied on the Council for protection now questioned its competence, its foresight, and its moral authority, pointing to the weapons ban as the pivotal error that had exposed their collective blindness. And while emergency sessions grew more frantic, human broadcasts, calm and measured, began circulating across the galaxy, outlining their version of events, emphasizing that humanity had sought cooperation, respect, and mutual defense, but had been met with dismissal and restriction, and that their actions now were not conquest for its own sake, but a necessary restructuring of a galactic order that had failed to recognize reality. This narrative resonated deeply with many neutral and even formerly hostile species who had long chafed under Council dominance and now saw in humanity an alternative center power that combined strength with adaptability. And as these alignments shifted, the Council found itself increasingly isolated, its once vast influence reduced to a shrinking cluster of loyal systems surrounded by human-controlled space. And in a final attempt to reassert authority, several Council leaders authorized the mobilization of their most powerful remaining assets, ancient fleets held in reserve for existential threats, weapons long considered too destructive to deploy. Yet even this gamble unfolded exactly as human strategists had predicted, because these reserves had been mapped, monitored, and countered years earlier, and when the fleets finally emerged from deep space, they found human forces already in position, not in defensive panic, but in calm readiness, formations optimized, contingencies prepared, and commanders confident in the outcome. And as these confrontations loomed, the psychological weight of inevitability settled across the galaxy, a shared understanding spreading among alien populations and leaders alike that the balance of power had irrevocably shifted, that humanity's rise was not a temporary surge, but a fundamental transformation, and that the Council's era of unquestioned dominance was ending not with a single catastrophic defeat, but with a systematic, undeniable unraveling orchestrated by a species they had once believed could be controlled with a simple ban, a belief now revealed as the most costly miscalculation in galactic history. By the time the Council's ancient reserve fleets fully committed to open engagement, the strategic environment had already been transformed beyond recognition, because humanity was no longer fighting to prove a point or secure survival. They were shaping the future architecture of galactic power. And this distinction became painfully clear as human commanders treated the arrival of these long-feared armadas not as an existential crisis, but as a predictable phase transition in a conflict they had already modeled to exhaustion. The reserve fleets, massive and visually overwhelming, advanced with ceremonial formations designed to project terror and inevitability. Yet beneath the spectacle lay doctrines frozen in an earlier era, doctrines that assumed opponents would respond with fear, hesitation, and centralized resistance, assumptions humanity had long since invalidated. And as the fleets crossed into contested space, human sensors, quantum-linked across dozens of systems, tracked every movement, every power fluctuation, every command signal, feeding data into adaptive battle models that updated in real time, allowing human task forces to reposition, redistribute firepower, and alter engagement envelopes faster than alien command crews could even communicate orders. And when contact finally occurred, it was not a single climactic clash, but a cascade of tightly controlled engagements unfolding across multiple vectors simultaneously. Human ships striking at propulsion, nodes, command relays, and energy distribution networks with surgical precision, disabling capital ships without catastrophic explosions, leaving one-sphere behemoths drifting helplessly as smaller alien vessels attempted futile rescue maneuvers, only to be intercepted by autonomous human drones operated with ruthless efficiency. The psychological impact on alien crews was immediate and devastating. Centuries of myth and confidence collapsing as reality asserted itself, while human forces maintained calm, disciplined communication, treating each disabled enemy ship as a data point rather than a trophy, learning and refining even as victory became inevitable. And as the reserve fleets faltered, Council leaders authorized escalation, activating weapons that violated their own long-standing prohibitions, unleashing energy discharges capable of destabilizing entire regions of space. Yet even this act of desperation failed to alter the outcome, because humans had anticipated it, deploying layered countermeasures, spatial dampening fields, and distributed shielding that absorbed, redirected, or nullified the attacks, turning what was meant to be a decisive show of force into another demonstration of alien desperation and human preparedness. And across the galaxy, observers from neutral and allied species watched in stunned silence as the Council's ultimate deterrents were rendered ineffective. The narrative of invincibility finally shattered beyond repair, and as human fleets pressed their advantage, they refrained from annihilation, instead broadcasting clear surrender protocols, offering safe disengagement and medical aid to crews willing to stand down, a gesture that further undermined Council propaganda and accelerated the collapse of morale. Within alien ranks, entire formations powered down voluntarily, their commanders recognizing that continued resistance served no strategic purpose, while human recovery vessels move into secure ships, evacuate wounded, and preserve infrastructure, reinforcing perception that humanity's objective was control and stability, not extermination. And within the Council chamber, panic reached its apex. Accusations turned into open hostility, alliances dissolved in real time, and emergency votes fractured along species lines. Each delegate seeking to preserve their own survival as collective authority they had relied upon for millennia disintegrated. Jacob Marston, observing the chaos, delivered a measured address that cut through the noise with unsettling clarity, outlining humanity's terms not as threats, but as logical consequences of demonstrated capability, emphasizing shared security, mutual defense, and a restructuring of galactic governance to reflect actual power dynamics rather than inherited privilege. And while some delegates reacted with outrage, others listened in silence, understanding that the balance of leverage had shifted irreversibly, and as human forces completed the neutralization of the reserve fleets, securing their remnants and integrating capture technology into ongoing analysis, the final illusion sustaining Council dominance evaporated, their military supremacy gone, their economic influence fractured, their moral authority exposed as hollow, and across countless worlds, alien populations began reassessing their future, recognizing that humanity had not merely won battles, but had revealed a new model of power, one defined by adaptability, integration, and relentless foresight. And as the fifth phase of the campaign drew to a close, the galaxy stood at a threshold, the old order collapsing under the weight of its own assumptions, and a new one emerging, shaped by a species that had been banned, dismissed, and underestimated, yet had used that very neglect to prepare for the moment they would step forward and demonstrate, beyond any doubt, that they were no longer participants in the galactic system, but its architects, and that any attempt to resist this reality now would only deepen the consequences of miscalculation already etched into history. As the immediate military threat posed by the Council's reserve fleets faded into irrelevance, humanity transitioned smoothly into the next phase of its long-prepared campaign, a phase that focused not on conquest through force, but on irreversible normalization of human leadership across the galaxy. And this shift was perhaps the most unsettling development for alien observers, because it demonstrated that humanity had never intended to rule through fear alone, instead aiming to make their dominance feel practical, stable, and unavoidable. Human administrators and strategists moved quickly to standardize security protocols, trade regulations, and interstellar transit laws across newly aligned systems, integrating alien economies into a unified framework that prioritized efficiency, redundancy, and resilience. And as these systems stabilized under human oversight, the quality of life on many worlds improved measurably, piracy declined, trade delays vanished, and previously marginalized regions gained access to infrastructure and medical technologies that the Council had withheld for centuries. This tangible improvement eroded resistance faster than any fleet ever could, because it reframed humanity not as conquerors, but as competent steward of a galaxy that had long suffered under stagnation and rigid hierarchy. And within former Council territories, human security forces worked alongside local defense units, training them in decentralized tactics, adaptive command structures, and rapid decision-making, subtly reshaping alien military cultures to mirror the flexibility that had made humanity unstoppable. And as these changes took root, the possibility of large-scale coordinated rebellion diminished, replaced by a patchwork of locally invested systems whose security and prosperity were now directly tied to human stability. Meanwhile, human intelligence networks continued operating at full capacity, monitoring dissent, tracking extremist factions, and preemptively neutralizing threats before they could coalesce, not through indiscriminate crackdowns, but through targeted disruption, economic incentives, and strategic isolation, ensuring that opposition never gained the momentum required to challenge the new order. And in the political sphere, humanity convened a provisional galactic assembly, inviting representatives from every species, including former Council members, but restructuring voting power to reflect actual contributions to security, trade, and governance, a move that sparked initial outrage among entrenched elites, but gained widespread support from smaller and previously ignored civilizations, who saw in the system a rare opportunity for meaningful participation. And as debates unfolded within this new assembly, human moderators enforced rules of discourse that emphasize data, outcomes, and accountability over tradition or inherited authority, gradually shifting the culture of galactic politics toward pragmatism. And while some alien leaders resisted this transformation, clinging to the remnants of the old order, their influence waned as more systems aligned themselves with human-led initiatives that delivered immediate, measurable benefits. And as humanity's administrative reach expanded, so too did their cultural influence. Human media, education frameworks, and scientific collaboration networks spread across the stars, introducing concepts of open inquiry, iterative problem-solving, and shared innovation that contrasted sharply with the Council's secrecy and rigid control, and young members of alien species, exposed to these ideas, began questioning long-held assumptions about hierarchy, destiny, and obedience, further weakening resistance from within. And on a strategic level, human military planners continued refining doctrines, conducting joint exercises with allied species, and upgrading defensive networks, not because they anticipated imminent rebellion, but because constant preparedness was a core human principle, one that had carried them from obscurity to dominance. And as these preparations continued, reports confirmed that no single power bloc remained capable of challenging humanity directly. The Council's remnants fragmented, their fleets either integrated into cooperative defense frameworks or dismantled under supervision, their former leaders reduced to symbolic figures with little real influence. And as the galaxy adjusted to this new reality, a profound realization settled across countless worlds. Humanity had not simply won a war. They had solved a systemic problem, replacing an outdated, brittle order with one that was flexible, responsive, and relentlessly forward-looking. And while some alien philosophers warned that such dominance carried risks, the immediate evidence suggested that humanity's approach, grounded in adaptability and shared interest, was more stable than anything that had come before. And as human fleets patrolled hyperspace lanes not as conquerors but as guarantors of order, and human administrators mediated disputes with efficiency rather than spectacle, the memory of the weapons ban took on a new meaning, remembered not as a moment of restraint imposed on humanity, but as a catalyst that forced them to prepare in silence, to innovate without oversight, and to emerge stronger than anyone had imagined. And in this phase of consolidation, the galaxy began to understand the true nature of the mistake it had made, that by attempting to limit humanity without understanding them, the Council had ensured that when humans finally acted, they would do so with overwhelming clarity of purpose, unmatched coordination, and a vision that extended far beyond victory, reshaping the galaxy in ways that could never be undone. And as the sixth phase drew to a close, the question was no longer whether humanity would remain dominant, but how the galaxy would continue to evolve under a species whose greatest weapon had always been its capacity to learn, adapt, and build something stronger from the ashes of miscalculation. As the seventh phase unfolded, the galaxy entered a period of uneasy calm that masked the depth of transformation underway, because while open conflict had ended, the consequences of humanity's rise were still propagating through political, cultural, and strategic systems that had not yet fully adapted. And it was during this phase that the remaining illusions held by former Council loyalists finally collapsed, as humanity began addressing the deeper structural flaws that had enabled centuries of stagnation, exploitation, and imbalance. Human analysts identified legacy power structures, monopolized resource nodes, and inherited military privileges that had quietly fueled resentment across countless species. And rather than dismantling them through force, humans applied pressure through transparency, opening data archives, publishing trade flows, revealing suppressed technologies, and exposing how the old Council had engineered dependency to maintain control. This revelation triggered waves of internal reform across alien societies, not because humans demanded it, but because populations now had undeniable evidence of manipulation and neglect. And as reform movements spread, former Council elites found themselves isolated, their authority questioned not by human fleets, but by their own people. Meanwhile, humanity continued integrating alien scientific communities into shared research initiatives, accelerating breakthroughs in energy generation, medical treatments, and spatial engineering at a pace never before achieved. And these advancements were distributed widely rather than hoarded, reinforcing perception that alignment with humanity meant access to progress rather than subjugation. And on the security front, human commanders initiated a final series of strategic audits, testing response times, alliance coordination, and system resilience through controlled simulations that involved dozens of species simultaneously. The results confirmed what many had already suspected: the galaxy under human leadership was not only more stable, but more adaptable, capable of responding to crises faster and with less collateral damage than under the old Council. And as these results circulated, even former adversaries acknowledged the efficiency of the new order, though often reluctantly. And within the Provisional Galactic Assembly, debates shifted away from resistance toward long-term planning, infrastructure expansion, and the ethical frameworks needed to manage a multi-species civilization led by humans. Questions of oversight, limits of authority, and succession were raised openly, and human representatives engaged with them seriously, aware that legitimacy depended not on invincibility, but on sustained competence and accountability. And this willingness to confront future risks openly further distinguished humanity from the opaque rule of the past. And in quieter corners of the galaxy, remnants of extremist factions attempted to rally resistance, invoking nostalgia for the old council and fear of human dominance. Yet these efforts consistently failed to gain traction, undermined by the visible improvements in security, trade, and autonomy experienced by most systems, and neutralized swiftly by coordinated intelligence operations that disrupted funding, communication, and recruitment without escalating into public violence, reinforcing the sense that chaos was no longer an effective tool for change. And as time passed, cultural exchange accelerated, human customs blending with alien traditions, producing hybrid institutions, shared holidays, and cooperative exploration initiatives that reframed humanity not as outsiders imposing order, but as participants shaping a collective future. And it was during this phase that many alien historians began revising their records, reassessing the weapons ban not as a noble attempt at peacekeeping, but as a pivotal moment when the Council revealed its fundamental misunderstanding of humanity, a species that responded to restriction not with compliance or rebellion, but with preparation, innovation, and patience, waiting until action was both justified and decisive. And as these revised histories spread, a generational shift in perception took hold, younger populations across the galaxy growing up in a reality where human leadership was normal, effective, and largely unchallenged, while the old narratives of inevitable council supremacy faded into irrelevance. And as humanity continued refining governance, defense, and cooperative expansion, the remaining uncertainty centered on a single question shared quietly among many species, not whether humans would maintain control, but whether they would remain as measured and restrained once dominance was no longer contested, a question that lingered as the galaxy stood on the edge of a future defined not by war, but by the long shadow of a miscalculation that had elevated humanity from underestimated participant to unquestioned architect of interstellar civilization. In the final phase, the galaxy reached a point of quiet resolution that felt heavier than any battle, because it was here that the full meaning of the Council's mistake became permanently understood, as humanity formalized the structures that would define interstellar life for generations, not through declarations of supremacy, but through systems that made their leadership functionally irreplaceable. The Provisional Assembly was ratified into a permanent galactic framework with clearly defined limits, redundancies, and oversight mechanisms, many of them inspired by humanity's own long history of internal failure and reform, a history the humans openly shared as caution rather than propaganda. And this honesty, uncomfortable as it was for many species accustomed to mythologized authority, cemented trust where fear never could. Former council worlds were gradually reintegrated as equal participants once they met transparent criteria for governance, security contribution, and civil protections, a process that took years rather than months. But deliberately so, because humans understood that stability built too quickly often collapsed just as fast. And as this reintegration continued, the last symbols of the old council were quietly dismantled, not destroyed in spectacle, but archived, studied, and preserved as reminders of an era defined by arrogance and complacency. The weapons ban itself became a subject of galactic education, taught not as an act of cruelty or wisdom, but as a case study in how power fails when it confuses control with understanding. And across human worlds, there was no celebration of conquest, no monuments of victory over alien fleets, only memorials to restraint, preparation, and the countless unknown individuals who had worked in silence for decades to ensure that when humanity finally acted, it would do so decisively and responsibly. And as trade flourished, exploration expanded, and cooperative fleets pushed into uncharted regions. Beyond the old council's reach, the galaxy experienced an era of growth unmatched in recorded history, driven not by fear of punishment, but by confidence in shared systems that worked. And even among species that still viewed humanity with caution, there was a growing acceptance that this dominance was different from anything before it, less about extraction and obedience, more about alignment and momentum. And in private reflections recorded by alien scholars, diplomats, and former admirals, a common theme emerged that humanity's greatest threat had never been its weapons, fleets, or technologies, but its ability to endure limitation without stagnation, to absorb pressure without breaking, and to prepare without announcing itself, waiting patiently until a moment action was unavoidable, and when that moment came, to act with overwhelming clarity. And as the galaxy settled into this new equilibrium, the final consensus was not one of resentment, but of sober respect, the understanding that the Council had not fallen because humanity was violent, but because humanity had been underestimated, restricted, and ignored, and had responded not with chaos, but with planning, unity, and resolve, ensuring that when the galaxy finally paid attention, it was already too late to stop them. And so the era that followed was remembered not as the age when humans conquered the stars, but as the age when the stars learned what happened when humanity was told no, prepared anyway, and proved beyond doubt that they had always been capable of shaping the fate of the galaxy, once given the reason, the time, and the freedom to do so.